Hey, everybody, welcome back to Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here, Jerome Zeringue, right here, District 52, State Representative. It's been a heck of a ride in Baton Rouge.
Oh, it has been.
You got a couple of trips that time, so
A
you
couple.
did a little redistricting and a couple other things.
We were doing some math, and so this is the middle of our second term. So, counting our first term and this one, we've been through 22 sessions, counting the regular four we're supposed to have, well, the six we're supposed to have, plus all the special sessions. We went through 22 sessions.
Holy smokes.
We got some experience.
And how long?
In 6, well, this will be the 7th year last year, so yeah.
Goodness gracious. Well, this was these last 3 years have been like no other between, a pandemic and then obviously a hurricane that we had last year. But it seemed like you guys were all getting along because there was plenty of money, right? You didn't have to cut schools. You didn't have to close hospitals. But you did have to figure out exactly where things that we can spend money that will help us furthest along down the road. So tell me a little bit about the budget and were you satisfied with what came out?
Well, you mentioned the problems that we've had with the pandemic and realizing that with the impact of the pandemic 2 years ago, we were actually having to use the influx of federal dollars to cover the shortfall because people weren't working, there weren't income taxes, and a lot of the problems we were having with payroll and the other typical things that state uses dependent upon for funding services. So we were closing the gap, and we're constitutionally obligated to balance the budget. So we have to balance the budget, either cut something or whatever we need to do. But we were able to use those federal dollars to close the gap. Well, fortunately, after these past 2 years, we're back to where the economy, and hopefully it'll continue to improve, we're actually using the revenue that we've had, not dependent upon the federal dollars, the influx of federal dollars to cover the shortfalls in our budgeting process.
Yeah, so that's good. Well, the oil and gas prices right now, will that help the state?
Well, it helps, and typically, you go back, we're not as dependent upon oil and gas in terms of the overall budget, but it's important to our region. Sure. Obviously, it's very important here. But from the state's perspective, the oil and gas revenue generates somewhere north of $600 million to the state budget. And typically, it's for every dollar increase in the barrel of oil from what was estimated. I think they used $67 per barrel. And so every dollar above that equates to about $10 million to the state budget. Yeah. So obviously, it definitely helps overall. It doesn't help when you go and fill up your tank in your car because of the problems we have.
Pay for it some other way, yeah. So, that is interest rates, inflation. It's all something we got to watch down the road for sure. Infrastructure is always a big part of what's coming out. And I guess, again, you're pulling dollars from a couple of different areas, the infrastructure fund, the one out of Washington, as well as some of these other ones. What can we see? From what the council people are telling me, you guys did pretty good.
Well, this region, obviously, we did good on a per capita basis. Terrebonne did just about better than any other parish, considering the fact that what we have for flood protection, infrastructure, and the other things that we have, but also for the state as a whole. One of the benefits from a statewide perspective is this has been a session of primarily education and infrastructure. If you look at the commitment that was made to education, we've made the highest and most significant investment in education. You look at the $80 million for early childhood development. Again, both of our wives were teachers. We know how important it is from an early age. $80 million to early childhood education before kindergarten, getting them started in the right foot. K through 12, significant investment, and also higher education, which is so important to keep the best and brightest here in Louisiana. Over $130 million for higher education. One thing about higher education, typically in the past, there was about a 50-50 split in terms of what was provided for universities, if you look at tuition and fees and the state contribution. But now it's about a 70-30 to where the state contributes 30 to 70. And we're getting closer to where we really need to be because the investment in higher education is an investment in our economy, our future of Louisiana.
That includes TOPS as well?
It includes that. We fully funded TOPS. Also, there's an interesting program we started this year, the Murphy Foster program, that will provide opportunities for people, primarily for technical and community colleges, to come back and provide funding for them to come back to get an advanced degree. at a community technical college. So,
So you don't
that's
have
an
to
important program.
drive off to a university and
Yeah.
no, they do a great job and they provide jobs, right? And
They do.
because look, you can give all the education and we talk about wanting to keep our kids local, right? We want them to have jobs when they come out of those colleges too. So that's always important. So the economy looks good, the infrastructure, and then y'all dealt a little bit with some redistricting. So that was part of one of the special sessions we were talking about. So didn't really get anything solved, and now you're waiting on a judge to maybe redraw some maps.
Well, we believe we resolved the issue initially in the maps that were agreed upon by both bodies, supermajority in both houses, went to the governor vetoed it, and it was reaffirmed by the body. We overrode the veto. And the effort that was made by the House and Governmental Affairs committees on both the House and the Senate did a good job of canvassing the state and getting input, and those maps reflected that. The problem is there were some challenges. It was in a court case. The Judge Dick, determined that the maps don't meet, as she believed, the requirements regarding the Voters' Rights Act, and so it's in court. And she ordered us to go back in, but she only gave us 5 days. This was a previous effort that took months, so it was going to be difficult to even achieve that.
Right, especially when there's a lawsuit involved. You can't really do much in 5 days. It sounded like she wanted to redo these maps as well, but then the state will probably appeal, I would imagine.
It's an appeal, and the Fifth Circuit that's down within the Fifth Circuit, and ultimately determine what happens. That could potentially go to the Supreme Court.
And there's an election coming up.
Yeah,
So
that's the problem.
That's the deadline. Right?
July 20th is the qualification for the congressional districts.
So if both kind of run out the clock,
Yeah.
they'll stay with the original.
Oh, maybe, or the judge. They may use the judge's map.
Lot going on. Let's talk about specifically some projects that may be going to influence our area and we can look forward to.
Well, there was the mega fund project bill that the president of the Senate worked through, which is going to make a significant contribution to infrastructure. If you remember last year, Tanner worked on a bill to allocate the funding for the sales tax for auto sales that are going to be directed to infrastructure projects. So that, in conjunction with the funding that's going to be provided in this bill, will provide significant dollars for major infrastructure projects, primarily $300 million for the Baton Rouge Bridge, which that's the biggest bottleneck on I-10. It's ridiculous.
So they're looking at going down Highway 30 and then going through like Plaquemine, right? And then eventually getting up at I-10?
Yeah, I think a little north of Plaquemine. There's 3 sites, anywhere from the existing bridge south to,
going bypass Baton Rouge
toward the White
instead
Castle.
of doing that 90-degree turn by the bridge.
And connecting to 30 to LE1. But the primary thing is they really need to get it to I-12. Unless you can connect to I-12, that's going to be the significant avenue to really relieve the traffic issues. But they seem to be insistent that those are the 3 routes that they're looking at, but tying into Highway 30 and LE1. Also, the infrastructure bill will work on the Calcasieu Bridge, which is another bottleneck. They need a bridge. But more importantly for us, significant dollars for I-49 south and north, and that's going to address that issue, especially in the Lafayette area, which is the most expensive right now to fix for I-49 to get it moving forward. But once we have that connection,
make it limited access, right? Yeah. Right now it goes down Evangeline Thruway. You'd have to find a way to make it limited access where you just can't have lights and all that.
And they're going to elevate it too, I think, over that area is what they're planning to do. So,
it's interesting because I thought we were going the other way,
and they may.
But I think where they were. Well, you know how they talk about New Orleans, like they want to knock down the Claiborne overpass and all of that.
Yeah,
that is interesting. Obviously it's better for traffic, but you just wonder how those neighborhoods.
And some of the things that we're looking at for infrastructure is the working on the projects, especially for roads in rural areas, on preservation projects. I call them preservation projects because they're kind of outside the state system, but they're overlay in other roads that don't get the attention from state dollars, but we have over $100 million that will be allocated to that to address rural highways and roads that desperately need repair. We also put significant dollars from the American Rescue Plan dollars. Last year, we had $3.2 billion. We allocated $1.6 billion last year to significant projects. This year we had $1.3 left. We put $500 million to the Unemployment Trust Fund, which is important because we if you reach those certain triggers, then they impose taxes on the employers and employees until we get to those triggers. We put $500 million of that, and with the existing dollars we have over $800 million in that fund, so the triggers won't be exercised, which will be good for employees and employers. We also put $400 million to the water sector projects, which definitely benefits Terrebonne Parish. They applied for a project and got it was a $7 million project that Mike and the Consolidated Waterworks District are going to put to good use to improve the system
Drinking water
here in Terrebonne Parish. So $450 million will address a lot of issues. It's a $4 billion problem in the state. We still have people in North Louisiana drinking and bathing in brown water. It's bad, but this is going to go a long way in improving a lot of those systems. We also worked on some projects here locally. We obviously working on hurricane protection, pump stations that are important. We worked on getting 3 pump stations in place, or getting them to be funded, the bridge in Lower Dularge. And also we put some money to evaluating getting Valhalla connected to Highway 90, which I think is going to be important ultimately to get that done as well.
Yeah, just for hurricane evacuation, for sure, and all those kind of things. BP always seems to be providing a lot of that. Can't go on forever, but is BP money still coming? How long does that last?
The settlement was subject to the agreement for over 15 years. So for the next, now it's less than
10. Yeah, that was 2010, right? Yeah.
But the ultimate settlement wasn't until where they started the payments about 3 years ago. So for the next 12 years, there's going to be at least $500 million going to Louisiana for specific to CPRA to address coastal protection and restoration issues.
Yeah,
and there's also they can also provide proposals. There's several pools of money, not to get too far in the weeds because it's complicated as heck. But in addition to the direct allocation to the state, there's also opportunities to apply for grants for other funding to put additional dollars too. But that's going to run out. So there's obviously going to be looking at other things, anything from wind farms. We passed a bill that we can now do wind farms off Louisiana, which, keeping in mind, there's 7 turbines in the continental waters of the United States. Well, 5 of them were built from Gulf Island Fabrication here, the foundation stuff here. So we have the technology, the capability, and we passed a bill to allow the state to begin lease sales for offshore wind farms off the state. We're the first one in the Gulf to do it within state waters. So we can begin hopefully within the next year or 2, we will have a lease sale to have a wind farm off the coast of Louisiana.
Do we have the right wind for that?
We do. There's a mighty wind. No. But there is the wind pattern isn't ideal. But in talking to BOEM and Department of Energy, the thing we have going for us, we have the technology, the expertise, the manpower. If you can build an all platform, you can darn well build a wind turbine. Yeah. So we have the expertise and capability, and that's the biggest thing we have going for us. But the wind patterns off Louisiana, primarily in the western portion of the state and the mouth of the river, are ideal and can work to develop wind farms here in Louisiana.
Yeah, no doubt, right. Just for employment purposes, and obviously green energy would be great. If we could blow those winds the other way when a storm comes, it'd be great. But no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what we do with that. Just wrapped up a session, your 22nd session in 7 years, which is incredible. But yeah, this one kind of, it ran a lot smoother, and they did have things. One of the good things to come out of it was pay raise for teachers. So that helps. I mean, it could always be more, but it's something. It was something this year.
Yeah, it did. We did a lot for education this year. As I mentioned earlier, again, this was a session that we had money and we put it to good use for higher education, K through 12, and for teachers, there was an additional $1,500 pay raise, $750 for support workers. But to put it in context, that's one raise. Within the last 4 years, we've given teachers 3 pay raises, which total $3,300. Now, granted, it doesn't get us to the Southern average, of which they deserve. Teachers deserve, at a minimum, to be paid the Southern average, if not more. The challenge is getting there, but I think we've demonstrated the commitment to work toward achieving that goal. And this session, we put additional dollars to that. And also to higher education, we provided funding for faculty because it's important for retainage of faculty. And so we put significant dollars to higher ed as well to support that.
Yeah, it's always important. And obviously, and that's America, right? The American dream of education, staying together as a family, getting, being better the next generation. And education, there's no better way to do it than education.
That's right.
So no doubt about that. So what else is going on? We were talking a little bit about wind and possibly starting leases for wind power. That's awesome. There's a lot of different things people are looking into. LNG, the liquefied natural gas, it has to be down to 260 below zero
Yeah.
to be able to liquefy it, to be able to transport it. With what's going on in Russia, what's going on around the world, energy, gas prices, refineries opening and closing. How important is that for us to be ready for the next wave of what the energy is for the world, or for particularly the United States?
Well, obviously, the investment that's being made in LNGs and natural gas, which is a clean burning fuel. We can talk about all the problems associated with oil and gas, but quite frankly, we're going to be dependent on oil and gas for decades. And so we just need to address how best we can utilize it. And also, again, you complain about, the president's going over to Saudi Arabia to entice them to use their oil when we do it cleaner. There's no one else who does it cleaner and in more environmentally beneficial way than the United States. So it's unfortunate, but the reality is there is going to be opportunities with natural gas, LNG, plussing up with hydrogen, looking at new forms of energy, alternative forms of energy that are going to be important into the future to meet your energy demand. So there is no doubt that all these alternative forms of energy will never supplant oil and gas in the near future, anytime recently within the next couple of decades. But I think utilizing oil and gas in addition to wind and solar and hydrogen and all the other opportunities will help meet the energy goal, which is expected to increase over 50% energy need, then expected to increase 50% over the next couple of decades. So it's going to take a combination of everything, not one at the expense of the other.
Do you guys ever talk about nuclear on a state level, or is that more of a federal level? Because I mean, that seems, I think now it takes 16 years to make a nuclear plant. It used to take 4, and right by now the technology should be the other way. But obviously, environmental issues, it takes now 16. On a state level, do we talk about that at all?
Well, we have 2, but on the state level, no one has applied. No one has applied as far as I know. But I think from the states level, the Public Service Commission and others may be somewhat involved, but primarily it's a federal issue to address that and develop one of those.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I was just curious, and we all got to be plugging in electric cars, but obviously you got to get that power from somewhere. You see Germany and a couple of countries in Europe are now starting to go back to coal because they can't fund it with the Russian natural gas, which is where we should be stepping in.
Which we can be an exporter to provide that for them.
Seems like we were not too long ago.
Yeah, we were. And we could be.
Explain a little bit about, again, you got green energies and then blue energies, which is hydrogen. Now, is that something that's ready to go, or is that they think that's the next thing?
Well, there are advancements that are being made, and one of the things that, again, will help not only incentivize that, but help develop that form of energy is looking at how it can be used in plussing up natural gas. You can, the combination of the two, and quite frankly, I don't completely understand the whole process. I'm not a chemical engineer, but the reality is it does provide an opportunity to maximize and utilize hydrogen with natural gas in combination that is going to be even cleaner and more efficient in its ability to use things. And those are some of the things that we can use potentially now, working toward that is going to help. And again, it just speaks to that whole aspect about all these different forms of energy will help meet our need and demand.
Because look, we were always, seafood and tourism, but oil and gas is where our money has come from here, and we got to be, I guess, ready for the next one, right? We don't want to be left behind,
And we are ready. And again, that's, as I mentioned earlier, with the wind energy. And speaking of BOEM and DOE, the thing that we have going for us is the infrastructure and the capability and the manpower and the know-how that we have here in South Louisiana that can take advantage of what's required to incorporate and utilize those technologies in different forms of energy. And we are ready and capable to step into that next development level.
Yeah, and like I said, we talk about education, but our kids need to have jobs to come home to, right? And that's a big part. And having those kind of technologies here would be a great way to provide high paying jobs and where our kids wouldn't have to go to Dallas or Houston
right.
or Atlanta or
right.
Nashville, right? We'd like them to stay here, right? We kind of like this culture a little bit, and it'd be real nice to let them grow and raise their families here. Well, Jerome, we appreciate your work, man. I'm sure you'll be back for a session next week or so.
Yeah, always look forward to it, Harry. Good seeing you, my friend.
Okay, man. We'll talk to you later. We'll be right back with more Bite Time.